Sarah's eyes snapped open in the darkness of her Cleveland apartment. The dream felt two real sparks flying from the Carousel's control box, flames consuming the vintage rides at Cedar Point Amusement Park. She could still hear her students' screams echoing in her mind. Tomorrow's field trip suddenly filled her with an inexplicable dread that made her hands tremble. The yellow school bus rumbled along Interstate 80 toward Sandusky, Ohio, filled with the excited chatter of 33rd graders. Sarah sat near the front, her clipboard clutched tightly as she tried to shake off the lingering unease from her nightmare. The morning sun cast long shadows across the autumn landscape, and the crisp October air carried the scent of burning leaves through the cracked bus windows. "Mrs. Mitchell, are we almost there?" Tommy Chun bounced in his seat, his backpack stuffed with snacks and a disposable camera his parents had given him for the trip. "About 30 more minutes. Tommy, remember what we discussed about staying with your buddy at all times." Sarah forced a smile, but her stomach churned as they passed the Cedar Point exit sign. Principal Davis, sitting across the aisle, noticed her pale complexion. "You feeling all right, Sarah?" "You've been quiet all morning. Just tired. Didn't sleep well last night." She glanced out the window at the towering roller coasters coming into view. The Millennium Force stretched impossibly high against the gray clouds, its steel frame gleaming like bones in the pale sunlight. As they entered the parking lot, Sarah's hands grew clammy. The carnival music drifting from the park entrance should have been cheerful, but it sounded distorted in her ears, like a music box winding down. The smell of cotton candy and funnel cakes, mixed with the metallic tang of machinery and the distant whiff of electrical equipment. "All right, everyone off the bus. Remember your buddy system and meet back here at 3 p.m. sharp." Principal Davis's voice boomed over the children's excitement. Sarah herded her group toward the entrance, her eyes scanning every ride, every electrical box, every potential hazard. The antique carousel sat in the center of the midway, its painted horses frozen in eternal gallops, their glass eyes reflecting the overcast sky. A maintenance worker was tinkering with a panel near its base, sparks occasionally dancing from his tools. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was exactly what she had seen in her dream. The group moved through the park like a small parade, the children's voices rising above the mechanical symphony of rides and carnival games. Sarah kept glancing back at the carousel, noting how the maintenance worker seemed increasingly frustrated with whatever problem he was trying to fix. Wisps of smoke occasionally escaped from the electrical housing, dissipating quickly in the cool breeze. "Mrs. Mitchell, can we ride the carousel first?" asked Emma Rodriguez, tugging on Sarah's jacket sleeve. "My mom said it's the oldest ride in the park. Let's start with something else, okay? Maybe the bumper cars?" Sarah guided them away, her pulse quickening as more children echoed Emma's request. The morning progressed normally, enough screams of delight from the kiddie coasters, the ping and flash of arcade games, the sweet aroma of caramel apples. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, like the electric charge in the air before a thunderstorm. Around noon, as they sat at a picnic table sharing lunch, Tommy pointed toward the carousel. "Look, Mrs. Mitchell, they're working on it again." Two maintenance workers now surrounded the ride's control booth. One held a walkie-talkie to his ear while the other peered into an open electrical panel. A thin stream of smoke drifted upward, barely visible against the gray sky. "I think we should stay away from that area for now," Sarah announced, trying to keep her voice casual. "How about we visit the haunted house after lunch?" Principal Davis raised an eyebrow. "The carousel's a classic, Sarah. Very safe. Been running for decades. I just ... have a feeling about it today." She could unexplain the cold dread that settled in her chest every time she looked at those painted horses. As the afternoon wore on, more students asked about the carousel. It had become the forbidden fruit of their field trip, made more desirable by Sarah's mysterious reluctance. She watched the maintenance crew's increasingly frantic work. Now 3 men huddled around the control system, their faces grave as they spoke in hushed tones. At 2:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before their scheduled departure, the carousel finally reopened. A small cheer went up from waiting families, and Sarah's students immediately began pleading. "Please, Mrs. Mitchell, just one ride before we go." The painted horses beckoned innocently enough, their bright colors cheerful against the darkening afternoon sky. But Sarah could see the hastily applied electrical tape over several junction boxes, the slight flicker in the ride's decorative lights, the way the operator kept glancing nervously at his control panel. Her dream rushed back with crystal clarity. The shower of sparks, the spreading flames, the screams. Her students were in danger, and she was the only one who knew it. "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, gathering her students away from the carousel despite their disappointed groans. "We need to head back to the bus." "But Mrs. Mitchell," Tommy started. "No discussion. Come on, everyone." Single file. Principal Davis looked puzzled as he caught up to her hurried pace. "Sarah, what's gotten into you? The ride's been cleared by maintenance." "It's perfectly safe." Sarah's throat felt tight. How could she explain without sounding crazy? "I just have a bad feeling about it, Jim. Call it teacher's intuition." As they walked toward the parking lot, Sarah heard a sharp electrical pop followed by excited shouting. She turned to see a small crowd gathering around the carousel. Sparks were shooting from the control booth like tiny fireworks, and the ride operator was frantically hitting an emergency stop button that wasn't responding. The carousel began spinning faster than normal, its cheerful carnival music warping into a discordant screech as the speed increased. The painted horses bobbed up and down in a frenzied dance, and the few riders, mostly teenagers who ignored the operator as shouted warnings to get off, clung desperately to the brass poles. "Everyone back to the bus, now!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She began herding her students away from the growing crowd of onlookers, her heart racing as she realized her nightmare was unfolding exactly as she dreamed it. Smoke began pouring from the electrical housing, thick and acrid. The carousel's lights flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the faces of panicked bystanders. Security guards rushed toward the ride with fire extinguishers while other park employees worked to clear the area. "Holy cow, Mrs. Mitchell, how did you know?" Tommy's eyes were wide with excitement and fear as they reached the relative safety of the parking lot. Sarah didn't answer. Her hands shook as she counted heads, making sure all 30 students were accounted for. Behind them, the carousel finally lurched to a stop, but not before flames began licking at the decorative canopy above the horses. The fire department's sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. "Sarah," Principal Davis said quietly, his face pale as he watched smoke billowing into the sky. "If we had been on that ride, ... She nodded, unable to speak. The weight of what almost happened, what she had prevented, settled heavily on her shoulders. As they loaded the shaken but safe children onto the bus, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and unease. She had cheated death today, saved 30 innocent lives through nothing more than an inexplicable premonition. But as the bus pulled away from Cedar Point, leaving the chaos of fire trucks and emergency responders behind, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. 3 weeks after the Cedar Point incident, Sarah tried to return to normalcy. The local news had covered the carousel fire. Extensively faulty wiring had caused the electrical system to overload, creating exactly the disaster she had foreseen. Her quick thinking had been praised by parents and administrators alike, though Sarah never mentioned the prophetic dream that had saved them all. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in November. Sarah was reviewing spelling tests when Principal Davis knocked on her classroom door, his face grave. "Sarah, I need to speak with you privately." In the hallway, he delivered the news that made her blood run cold. "It's Emma Rodriguez. She was killed yesterday evening in a car accident." Sarah's knees went weak. Emma, the sweet girl who had wanted to ride the carousel first. What happened? Her family was driving home from dinner. Their car hit a patch of ice on Route 2, went into a spin, and, well, they hit a tree. She was the only one who didn't make it. The word spin echoed in Sarah's mind like a death knell. A spinning car. Just like the spinning carousel she had escaped. 2 days later, another knock on her door. This time, it was a phone call transferred from the office. Tommy Chun's mother, her voice thick with grief, explained that Tommy had fallen from his bike while riding in circles around their driveway. A freak accident. He'd somehow gotten tangled in the spokes and broken his neck. Spinning. Always spinning. Sarah began keeping a list, checking on each student from the field trip obsessively. Within a month, 5 children were gone. Marcus Williams died when a playground merry-go-round malfunctioned, flinging him into a concrete barrier. Lisa Parker was found at the bottom of her apartment building's spiral staircase, her neck broken from the fall. David Kamar was killed when a ceiling fan came loose in his bedroom, its spinning blades becoming deadly projectiles. Each death was ruled accidental, but Sarah saw the pattern. The curse of the carousel had followed them home. Death was collecting its due, claiming the lives she had saved through elaborate, spinning traps. She tried warning the remaining families, but how could she explain without sounding insane? Keep your children away from anything that spins. They would think she'd suffered a breakdown from the trauma of the near disaster. By December, Sarah had developed severe insomnia. Every night, she lay awake listening to the sounds of her apartment, the whisper of air through the heating vents, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional creak of settling wood. She had removed every potentially spinning object from her home. The ceiling fans, the washing machine's spin cycle disabled, even her desk chair replaced with a stationary stool. The paranoia consumed her. At school, she found herself steering students away from anything circular. The tetherball pole, the rotating door at the library, even the spinning globe in her classroom. Her colleagues began to whisper about her strange behavior, her sudden phobias, her haunted expression. On a bitter December night, as snow swirled outside her apartment windows in hypnotic patterns, Sarah realized she couldn't run forever. Death had already claimed 15 of her students, each in accidents involving spinning motion. 15 innocent children who should have died in the carousel fire but lived long enough to be stalked by an entity that didn't appreciate being cheated. She was the last one left, the final debt to be collected. Sarah's apartment had become a fortress against circular motion. She disconnected every appliance with moving parts, taped down loose items that might spin in the wind, and even avoided looking at the clock on her wall. Its sweeping second hand felt like a countdown to doom. But you can't hide from death forever. It started small. The bathroom faucet began dripping in a steady rhythm that seemed to mock her paranoia. The refrigerator's compressor hummed with a slightly off-kilter vibration. Her neighbor's washing machine, directly above her bedroom, seemed to run at all hours of the night, its spin cycle penetrating the walls like a mechanical heartbeat. Sarah stopped eating regularly, afraid to use the microwave with its rotating plate. She avoided the kitchen entirely after noticing how the Lazy Susan in her cabinet had somehow rotated an inch or two each day, despite her not touching it. Sleep became impossible. Every settling sound in the old building seemed like machinery starting up, preparing to claim its final victim. On December 23rd, 3 days before Christmas, Sarah made a desperate decision. She would leave Cleveland entirely, start fresh somewhere else. Maybe distance would break whatever supernatural hold the carousel's curse had on her life. She packed quickly, taking only essential items in a single duffel bag. As she locked her apartment door for the last time, she felt a moment of hope. The hallway was silent, the building still. Maybe she had finally outrun her fate. The hotel room in Columbus was sparse but safe. No ceiling fans, no appliances beyond a simple lamp and television. Sarah slept for 12 straight hours, the first real rest she'd had in months. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and for a brief moment, she felt normal again. She spent Christmas Eve walking through the quiet downtown streets, watching families hurry past with wrapped packages and bright smiles. The normalcy of it all made her previous fears seem almost ridiculous. Maybe the deaths really had been coincidences. Maybe grief and guilt had driven her to see patterns where none existed. That evening, back in her hotel room, Sarah allowed herself to relax for the first time in weeks. She ordered room service, took a hot shower, and settled into bed with a paperback novel she'd found in the lobby. The heating system hummed quietly in the background, a comforting, steady sound that reminded her of childhood winters. But as the night wore on, the humming seemed to change. The rhythm became more pronounced, more deliberate. Sarah tried to ignore it, focusing on her book, but the sound seemed to be coming from directly above her room. She called the front desk. "Is there some kind of machinery running upstairs? It's keeping me awake. I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're on the top floor. There's nothing above you but the roof." Sarah hung up slowly, her heart beginning to race. The humming was definitely getting louder, and now she could detect an underlying rhythm, not random machinery, but something deliberate. Something spinning. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door, but the elevator was out of order. The emergency stairwell was a tight spiral, its metal steps disappearing into darkness above and below. Sarah stood frozen in the hallway, trapped between the mysterious spinning sound in her room and the deadly spiral that was her only escape route. The humming stopped abruptly, leaving in silence that was somehow worse than the noise. Sarah retreated to her hotel room, pressing her back against the door as if she could hold back fate itself. The silence stretched on, broken only by her rapid breathing and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Maybe it was over. Maybe she had imagined the whole thing. Then she heard it, a soft whirring sound, so quiet she almost missed it. Her eyes swept the room frantically, searching for the source. The television was off, unplugged for safety. The lamp sat motionless on the nightstand. The heating unit was silent. The sound grew slightly louder, and Sarah's gaze fell on the bathroom. She approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the thin carpet. The door was ajar, revealing darkness beyond. As she pushed it open, the whirring became unmistakable. The bathroom fan was running, but she hadn't turned it on. She never used fans anymore, had trained herself to live without them. Her hand trembling, she reached for the switch on the wall. It was already in the off position. The fan spun faster. Sarah flipped the switch up and down repeatedly, but nothing changed. If anything, the small motor seemed to accelerate, its blades becoming a blur in the dim light from the bedroom. The sound grew from a whisper to a hum to an aggressive whine that filled the tiny space. She backed out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind her, but the sound penetrated the thin wood easily. The fan was spinning wildly now, its motor straining with a high-pitched squeal that made her teeth ache. She could hear screws loosening, metal fatigue setting in as the mechanism pushed beyond its design limits. Sarah grabbed her bag and headed for the window, but they were sealed shut, a safety feature in the modern hotel. The door to the hallway beckoned, but she knew the spiral staircase waited beyond. Its twisted geometry, another trap in the pattern that had been hunting her for months. The bathroom door began to rattle in its frame as the fan's vibrations intensified. Whatever force was driving the mechanism beyond its normal capacity, it wasn't bound by the laws of physics or electrical engineering. This was something else, entirely, a supernatural engine of revenge that had been patient but never forgot. Sarah pressed her hands to her ears, but the sound seemed to come from inside her skull now. The whining of the fan mixed with phantom carnival music, the screams of children who had died in spinning accidents, the grinding of metal on metal as machinery pushed beyond its breaking point. The rattling stopped suddenly. In the abrupt silence, Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, unnaturally loud in the stillness. Then, With a sound like thunder, the bathroom door exploded outward in a shower of splinters and dust. Through the debris, Sarah saw the ceiling fan hanging by a single wire, its broken blades scattered across the bathroom floor like silver teeth. But impossibly, it was still spinning, not the blades, but the entire motor housing, rotating slowly on its mounting point like a hypnotic pendulum. She couldn't look away. The spinning motion drew her eyes, held them captive as the broken fan rotated faster and faster, its damaged electrical connections throwing sparks that danced like fireflies in the dark bathroom. The carnival music was back now, playing from speakers that didn't exist, growing louder as the fan spun faster. Sarah understood now. There was no escape, no distance far enough to run, no safety to be found in a world full of spinning things. The Carousel's curse had claimed all her students, and now it had come for her, the teacher who had thought she could cheat death through nothing more than a prophetic dream. As consciousness faded from her eyes, the last thing Sarah saw was her apartment's ceiling fan, the one she thought she had disconnected months ago, beginning its final, inexorable spin. The blades moved slowly at first, then faster, casting shifting shadows across the walls like the painted horses of a nightmare carousel that would never stop running. The music played on as the shadows danced, and somewhere in the distance, children's laughter echoed through the empty rooms of a school that would need a new third-grade teacher come January.